All right, let's go. We're going to do innovation choir. And I don't think there's anything wrong with this, but you just feel like, man, it's just something's not working with the job, and I don't want to do this, or I don't want to be here. And it's not to say that I don't want to take care of patients, but it's something about the system. So I quit that job, and I had saved up some money, and I joined Doctors Without Borders. And that was probably one of the best things that I ever did. It was kind of weird how it all started because they started with a phone interview, and they called me, and I'll never forget, the person was asking me over the phone, hey, would you be comfortable going to a war zone? I was like, what? I did not want to go to a war zone, but I was afraid to say that to her because I'm like, no, I really want to work with Doctors Without Borders. But it really got me thinking, like, okay, well, do you want to do the work or not? Because what they do is they do go to places where in war zones or people are displaced by armed conflict or natural disasters. So it can be dangerous. The travel's dangerous, and there's armed conflict. So it really had a real conflict in my goals and my values. So I was kind of like, I was on the phone with her, and I'm like, I don't know about that. I mean, maybe. So that was good enough to get the in-person interview. So they brought me to the New York office, and I met a whole bunch of people, and they asked me really difficult questions, and I answered really honestly, and I really wanted it. I wanted so badly to just practice medicine in a different way. So they ultimately offered me a mission, which I accepted, and they were going to send me to Sri Lanka. And I had plenty of time to read about the history of the mission and the area that I was going to go to. And I even had a chance to call one of the other doctors that had been there. He was one of my former attendings. I called him up, and I basically vetted him about the project, and he said everything's fine, you may have to learn about snake bites, and I'm like, okay, sounds good to me. And then it was getting time I went through all the paperwork, all this stuff, and then it was almost time to go, and they called me, and they're like, okay, bad news, we cannot get you your Sri Lanka visa. Can you go to South Sudan instead? Just like that. You have to leave in 3 days. I was like, whoa, talk about having the rug pulled out from under you. I didn't know anything about Sudan. And I was so anchored to this idea of going to Sri Lanka that it was very, very, very jarring for me, and it was terrifying. And I didn't know much about Sudan. I knew that there had been a war. There was a war at the time. This was in 2010, so there was definitely conflict. They were actually getting ready for the referendum to decide whether to split into the North and South. So at that time, it was still one big country of Sudan. And I just remember it was one of the hardest decisions I ever had in my life, because I'm like, okay, I want to do Doctors Without Borders, but on the other hand, I'm so afraid of what might happen. I might die or something, kidnapped, bombed, killed, get sick with malaria. Who knows? There was the unknown. I talked to a whole bunch of attendings and mentors, and I don't know. I would say most of them were kind of like, no, why would you do this? And then I had maybe 2 people who I really trusted, and they're like, yeah, I understand why you need to go. And so I decided to go. I think actually what I did was I tricked myself. I kind of pulled a little fast one on myself, saying, why don't you just go to New York and then do the meetings and hear what they have to say. And then you go to Paris, and then there's another round of meetings, and then you go to Uganda and you get your Uganda visa. There's all these, like, they told me how the trip is gonna go. And I'm like, okay, that sounds good. Why don't I just keep going, and then I'll just see, and then I'll take the next step. And at any point I can back out. So I think that was very, it worked, but it was probably like, I don't know. It's a way that I made myself feel better. Anyway, I went to Sudan. I got to my village in South Sudan. It took me 6 flights, 6 days, and I'll never forget getting out of the plane and just being, walking onto the red dirt in Aweil, or at the airport in Aweil, and I've never felt so far away from home. And it was hot, and the guy came up and he picked me up in a Land Cruiser with the Doctors Without Borders, name on the car, and then they had the flag, and that's all cool. But at the time, it's like, you look at I show my students the videos and the pictures. And
Tony, what's your weather prediction for tomorrow?
Hot and sweaty. Tonight with a chance of darkness with scattered light near morning.
Like, that looks very cool, but at the time I'm like, you can't think about anything except for being super tired, super hot, just hungry, just not feeling well. I was just like, just the heat and the exhaustion alone just make you feel so sick. And that's the traveling part. It's not to say that I ultimately wound up having the best mission of my life, but it's jarring when you go from New York City, Paris, and it's the fall, and it's like, early fall, and it's like the weather is perfect, and you get to South Sudan, it's pretty hot. So I get to my mission, the compound, and I'll never forget, I met the head doctor of the mission, and I think she greeted me and she said welcome, and then I think within like the first breath, she's just like, well, are you ready to go to the hospital? We're ready, there's some cases to do. And I could not believe it. I told her, I'm like, hey, I haven't slept. I've been traveling for 6 days, 6 flights. I haven't eaten. She's like, okay, after lunch then. So they brought me my lunch, and I started drinking the heavily chlorinated, or treated water. I think it was chlorine. And then we went to the hospital.
One time they delivered a bunch of diesel.
And just started seeing patients, and yeah, it ultimately was I got really sick. Everybody got sick in that mission, and so that was kind of rough. But after I recovered from the stomach bug, I really settled into a rhythm, and I just remember it was really interesting. I was super worried about the mosquitoes, and especially since I had dengue fever twice, so I was like, I can't get dengue fever again. So I was worried about a mosquito-borne illness like malaria or dengue.
I'm trying to get a video of this. Can't really appreciate this with the video, but there's just so many bugs.
Does it mean it will rain? No. Bet in the book.
And then there was a meningitis outbreak. So I was really kind of worried about that stuff, and I was fussing with the mosquito net at night, and of course I think mine had a hole in it, so I was duct taping it and always making sure that there wasn't any little places where the mosquito could come in, and it was just hot. You just lay in bed and sweat. And there was a trick. You had to try to get into your bed and have a fan right in your face, and you had to fall asleep before they cut the power, because then your fan would stop. And if you could do that, you might catch a little bit of sleep. And if you didn't, you were screwed. you probably wouldn't sleep much during the night. And I would say most nights I didn't sleep well. It was just so hot. However, this was the weirdest thing. Despite the conditions, and I wasn't not they weren't good conditions. I was living in a tukul. It was very hot. I wasn't super excited about the food. Very spoiled. Stand-up style latrines, and I was extremely happy. And it was the weirdest thing in the conditions of, like, it also the work that we were doing. We didn't have the equipment that I was used to back in the States. Didn't have the resources, we didn't even have like a general surgeon. So there's a lot of stuff that we just couldn't do, or we couldn't do well, and we didn't have options for some of the patients. So obviously there were bad outcomes like all over the place. But despite that, I felt really happy. I was very surprised. And I think part of it was the team. When you have a good team and you really, really connect with your team, and you can joke around and you're just really on the same team and you work together every day, that's gold. There's nothing better than, I think, that. And then the other thing is, I think, it was very different because there wasn't all this, it's very different to practice in the United States compared to like anywhere else in the world. So we've got the medical legal stuff, we've got a lot of, there's a lot of oversight, and then there's the insurance and the billing, the extensive charting and medical records. Not to say that I'm not gonna say I have a problem with anything, at least not in this video. But but the way that we were practicing for Doctors Without Borders was a lot of that was like really kind of stripped away, and we were just focusing on the medicine, doing the best we could with limited resources. And there was something special about that I just felt really focused on patient care. And it kind of brought me back to what I felt like as a student. And as a student, I really fell in love with medicine. I mean, you couldn't get me out of the hospital. I would stay, and I would just keep staying, and they're like, go home, and then of course everything switches when you become an intern, and all you want to do is you want to get out of the hospital, and they're like, nope, you gotta keep staying, you gotta keep working. And yeah, so I came home from that trip, and I was just a completely different person. I had a different, I felt really good, and I just needed that so bad. And it was not a super long trip, a couple months, but it was enough to like, okay, all right, I still love this. It's not about the practice of medicine. It's about something else, and maybe it's the system. So that really helped me. I thought that trip was like a real game changer, and I can look back on that and think about how I was also very grateful when I did come back, because I got to experience all the things that I think I take for granted, or I think maybe many of us do, but I know I do. I forget how great it is to have climate controlled living. You got the heat, you could press these buttons, turn the temperature up, turn the temperature down. You got the indoor plumbing with clean water, and a sit down toilet, and then food and nice restaurants where we can go to, and changing jobs. So that's going on a mission. That was one thing. Changing jobs. So then after that, I decided to do some locum tenens, and I would go and I would do work for a week and make some money and then take like a big break. And I think taking large chunks of time off, I mean, if you can, I mean, there were times in my life where I could do that, because when I actually got to, like, I was put all my stuff in my parents' house, and I didn't have a place to stay, so I didn't have rent, I didn't have a mortgage. I was like a vagabond, and with such little expenses, you obviously don't need to work a lot. And so that created a special year of my life where I was doing trips and things that were really meaningful to me. And then I just worked periodically, maybe, once a month or once every 6 weeks or 2 months, I don't know, something like that. And that was great. I think going back and so the next thing I did was I went to New Zealand. Now, New Zealand was also one of the best times of my life.
Do you feel the song?
Nailed it. Put that at the end too. Nailed it.